How many of you in here has ever made a mixtape? Most of you. So when I was a kid, I spent the majority of my week, at least for some period of time, in front of the radio, waiting for that one song to come on, typically Mötley Crüe or Bon Jovi, and I would throw myself onto the record button and capture it onto the mixtape. And the tape would have, I'd have maybe 95% of the song. It would have a little bit of the host's voice, but I love walking around with my Walkman listening to these mixtapes. So last year, Spotify launched the AI DJ. It is something that we conceptually considered for some time, but due to new advancements in technology around voice and AI in particular, we were able to launch this product, which is essentially a slightly more modern version of the radio, and the mixtape in this case is curated for me, or it's a personalized selection of music together with an AI-generated voice. And on top of that, we have added context with aid of generative AI, which creates a very compelling experience. Just to give you a taste of it.
Hey Max, I'm X, your own personal AI DJ on Spotify. Let's go. Introducing DJ, the best of Spotify made just for you, one tap away. Hey, I'm super excited to show you a little more behind the scenes on how we brought the DJ to life. First, I want to introduce you to someone very special to me. I wouldn't be here without him. It's the real X. It's fun hearing your own voice introduce you. Hey, what's going on? I'm Xavier Jernigan. My friends call me X, and I'm the first voice model for the DJ. The voice you just heard sounds like mine, but I never said those actual words. It was made by AI based on my voice.
Yeah, so I was very impressed when I saw this the first time. My 10-year-old self had been mind blown. So if you haven't checked it out, do have a look at it. It's a pretty cool feature. But I'm not here to talk about specific Spotify features. I'm here to talk about innovation and experimentation in particular, and what's behind the features. So I'll start by digging into innovation a little bit, and by saying that innovation is certainly not the norm. It takes a lot for somebody to go from nothing into something, or to take something in existence and make it better. It involves a fair amount of risk-taking, and quite often there's even a lot of things around people in organizations of today that's holding back innovation. It's true in organizations today, and it's been true throughout history, in moments big and small. For example, when Gutenberg invented the printing press, the scribes guild in Paris in the 15th century managed to delay the introduction of printing by 20 years. And I think we see micro examples of this all over the place still. So for Spotify, our aspiration is this. We want to move really fast, iterate quickly, and take big risks. We know we need to take big risks in order to drive innovation. And to get innovation, we need to cultivate curiosity. So what does that mean in practice? So when it comes to cultivating curiosity, I think there's a few key components here. One is autonomy. We need to give people the space to innovate. So we build our teams around missions and people that get a lot of space to test things, to innovate within that space. We need transparency. We need to make sure that people have the right context, strategic context, know what's going on inside the company, outside the company, in order to make sound decisions and know what space to innovate within. And we need connectivity. Matthew talked about this in his keynote too, that the social interactions, the dynamic interaction between people are so important. And when it comes to innovation, I think a lot of that comes from connecting people to each other and connecting people to users. So to drive up that connectivity in various ways will also help people be more curious about what's going on, and which will help drive up innovation. I think the anti-pattern here is the separation of thinkers and doers, if you will. And so a key principle here to remember is to connect hands to heads. You need to give people the space to not only do, but also to strategize and be part of ideation and innovation. The other part here is this idea of the safe to fail environment, which I think we talked about a lot in our industry. But what does it actually mean in practice? I think this is one of these things that's very hard to actually operationalize. This is not about a process. This is really about culture, and culture is the set of behaviors in the organization. So how do people respond? And in particular, how do leaders respond? And arguably, we're all leaders. When something goes wrong, for instance, when you have an incident, do you look for a scapegoat, or do you conduct a no-blame post-mortem to figure out what went wrong and how you can improve it? But it's also smaller things. When in a team meeting, somebody brings a new idea, how does people around respond to that? Is it with curiosity, tell me more? Or is it, that doesn't work here, we tried it before? I think the collective behaviors in those moments is partly what is driving this environment. So that's something I think is very important to bring along. Because if you don't have this, if people don't feel safe to take risks, you are not going to get the innovation that you probably look for. So for us to sort of go from idea then to actual new product or increment, we want to make bets. We want to take these risks. We know we need to test things a lot. But in order to do this in a safe way, we need to make sure that we are making grounded and informed decisions. So that's a key underpinning of all this, which is where experimentation comes in. So what is that? So I think there's two key parts to experimentation. One is the product development practices and the culture you have. How do you actually go about strategizing and turn your ideas into products? And the culture that I'm talking about here has evidence-based decision-making as its core. So whatever you want to do, you start with a hypothesis about how the thing you're thinking is going to change the world. What metrics is going to prove that that is true, and then you deploy that as an experiment. And to do that, you need a good experimentation platform to do it on top of. And these two things reinforce one another. So a culture will drive the demands for a better platform, and a better platform will drive a better experimentation culture. And it's all about decision-making. And decision-making is not only about making good decisions about what to do, but it's also about avoiding bad decisions. And depending on your state of maturity, for Spotify, we have a pretty mature product at this point. So I'd say that for us, it's probably even more about avoiding bad decisions. There's a lot we can do to mess things up these days. So whatever we do, we need to make sure that it's a good decision, and we're avoiding bad decisions. And the way we do that is through A/B tests and rollouts mainly. That's what experimentation looks like in practice for us. So these are both evaluation tools that provide actionable insights that helps us inform our product direction. So an A/B test, you probably already know this, so a bit of one-on-one here, but it helps you choose between two or more experiences by comparing users' reactions. So what it looks like in practice is that you have a set of users, you split them into two groups here. The first group, variant A, you don't make any changes, and variant B, you introduce the new change. And then you compare the two over time, and you see which one performs better. If the new variant performs better, you will introduce and roll out the change, essentially. So we do this. So the classic example here is a red and green button. We absolutely do a lot of UI-based tests to Spotify, but we do A/B testing for things like content, recommendation algorithms, machine learning models, what have you. It exists all over. And just to give you a specific example of what this could look like in practice, imagine this is the Spotify home screen in the app, and imagine we have a team working on the try something else shelf. Their goal is to get people to try something else, to drive up consumption from that shelf, help people connect to new music. So they have an idea that, what if we introduce a shuffle button on this screen? Maybe that will drive up the engagement. Maybe people will click it, and through that, more easily and frictionless, find new music. So they would introduce that button, they would launch an experiment, they would give that to the treatment group, and they would retain the current experiment in the control group, and if it performs better, they would roll out the new feature. I'll get back to that a little bit later. A rollout is different from an experiment in that it's only about shipping a new experience in a controlled way. So in a similar way, you do a random split, but it's only about giving the new experience to first, say, 15% of users. You check your metrics that nothing is deteriorating, and if it looks good, you go to 35, 70, and 100. This is a really good, this is how we roll out essentially everything at Spotify, and this is a really good entry point into experimentation. If you have a hard time convincing your leaders or whoever makes decisions in your company to get serious about A/B testing and experimentation, it's usually a lot easier to convince people that we should roll out features in a way where we are actually able to see how we're performing and that we're not tanking any of our key metrics. And if you have a platform where you do this effectively, then the step to A/B testing is smaller. So did we start here? No, we absolutely did not. So we also came from a world where we didn't have a platform at all. And I'll talk you through that journey briefly here. So this is Spotify's growth, roughly, since we launched in 2008 in Sweden. And I think UK was very early. I don't know if we have any early Spotify users that know when we came to the UK, but I think it was around that time too. So since then, we've grown to, now we're just about 600 million monthly active users and just north of 200 million premium subscribers. I joined the company in 2013. We were about 800 employees then, and we're somewhere around 8,000 today. So it's definitely been a journey. 2013 was a significant year, not only because I joined, but for other reasons. So prior to this, we were largely you can say we were really testing in a statistically sound way. We did some testing, but it was all coded into the clients. Everything happened on device. So we didn't really know what was going on. So arguably, we were making most decisions intuition-based, or we were winging it, kind of, which probably makes sense. In the very early stages of a company, you probably don't want to overinvest in testing practices, but you should probably introduce them fairly early in particular rollouts. So that's where we came from, but we had an analytics team, and it was growing, and that team started to increase the demand for an actual platform or a framework on top of which we could run tests. So in 2013, we built our own first A/B testing platform, which was branded ABBA, which might be the best named internal tool in Spotify history. So this came out in 2013. What it was at its core, it was a feature flagging system. So we could now remote control the Spotify experience, which was a big leap. Today it's probably table stakes for most people in here, but it was a pivotal moment in our journey here. So it had feature flagging, had some basic metrics capabilities, and the introduction of this really drove up the rate of experimentation. So we went from a handful of tests per year to hundreds of tests per year. And the analytics team kept growing, and the demand kept growing as well. So if you move forward a few years, we started to see some problems with what we had built here in ABBA. In particular, there was a one-to-one mapping between a flag and an experiment. So they were completely intertwined. And those two are really separate capabilities, to be able to control the experience and to run experiments where you control the app are two different things. But we had them intertwined, so whenever you wanted to launch a new experiment, you had to introduce a new flag. So that the app was full of flags. They were somewhere outdated, they were mixed. It created a bit of a messy situation internally, and sometimes that also affected users who got a bit of a weird Spotify experience. The data stack itself was also breaking because the ABBA system was emitting a lot of events. So we were on-prem at the time, and our data systems could simply not take the load. So we started getting more incidents, and it was troublesome for that reason too. So that was part of why we also migrated to the cloud, which was a big step. So that happened in 2016. And with that, we're on a proper data warehouse, and we could even more quickly iterate and run our data jobs, which was further drove up testing, further drove up the demand. But the most analysis was still manual. So when the test concluded, our data scientists and analysts had to spend many hours running data jobs and doing the manual analysis. The coordination of tests and users also was a manual process. So imagine when we were small, it's fairly easy to know what tests are running and coordinate across teams. But as we grew to hundreds of teams, that coordination got harder and harder to know what parts of the app are we currently testing in, what users are in what sort of, we had bucket ranges between teams, and so you can use these users, you can use those users. But since that was manual, it was also very error prone, and we got some problems from it. So that led us to yet again start thinking about what should this platform look like. And this is an innovation story of its own, because this really came bottoms up from a set of engineers, group of engineers who in 2017, they got together in Stockholm for 2 weeks. Some people from the analytics side, some people from the data side, and just looked at the situation and hacked away on it for 2 weeks, and it came up with what later became the new experimentation platform, which in and of itself was a big project that spanned many teams across the company, and we ran it for probably a year and a half before we had it fully implemented. But in 2017, 2018 is when we launched this new platform. So here we had a clear separation of flags and experiments. You could now fully dynamically, remotely configure the app in whatever way you want it. We had a metrics platform introduced at this time, so it was easy to publish and inventory metrics that you were trying to move through your experiments. We solved the coordination and analysis problem. With this, we went from few hundred experiments on top of ABBA to now thousands of experiments every year. So again, a combination here of both the growth of the company, of course, but with the platform, I think the platform really helped drive up that culture of experimentation. And in the journey here, we've also had, I think Matthew talked about enabling teams. So we had a small engagement team in the team building this platform who were out working with users around Spotify and help them to both onboard to the platform, but also ramp up on their sort of experimentation practices. So that was also part of the growth of this. From 2017, 2018, we've kept iterating on this platform, and we built in more and more capabilities, automated more and more of the analysis and coordination. And last year, we decided to take everything we built into this and release it as a commercial product that we call Confidence, which is essentially a decade of learnings packaged into this platform. So today we have over 300 experimenting teams and 10,000 more experiments every year. Like I said, 600 million users, and we're global now. We're in almost every market. So it's a very big experimentation program, and Confidence is the platform we run it on. So it has all these capabilities built in. And just to show you, sort of go back to the example where I started, the shuffle button example. How it would work today is that you start by defining up your flags. So you define what properties you need in this particular experiment with the shuffle button. What are the things you're changing here? You add that to a feature flag. Then you define your metrics. So in the case of this shuffle button, this team, this is a really important part of the process. So you have your hypotheses and you start so we have this idea about the shuffle button, right? It's going to improve the experience, but what are we going to measure? What is the thing that we're trying to optimize for here? And if you have that team, they might first say that a good metric would be number of plays from this shelf, say, or share of users consuming music from the try something else shelf. Those two metrics could be a bit concerning, because if you only measure that, you might actually be cannibalizing on the podcast to try shelf or other parts of the app if you're only focusing in on that particular part of the experience. So a better metric here might be a more global metric like minutes played in total, and then you might want to add a secondary metric to see how many people actually started their play from this particular shelf in order to correlate the two. So it's a very important part of the process to figure out what metrics to measure. So those would be success metrics. We also add guardrail metrics to an experiment. So those are the things that you just want to keep an eye on, make sure that they're not deteriorating. So it could be anything from general retention to more like app crashes or other sort of reliability types of metrics. So all that is built in, so you can follow both success and guardrails. And then you bundle these into an experiment, a test or a rollout, where you define up your flags, what metrics you're trying to improve, and then you ship it. And then as you're running and concluding the experiment, the analysis today is fully automated. And I think this is not only important because it speeds up our sort of lead time, but it's also, by doing the analysis automated, you can essentially configure your culture and your approach to product development and your risk appetite, because there's a lot of factors going into an experiment in terms of how many users do you need to test it on, how long do you need to run it for, and the more users and the longer you run it, the higher sort of statistical significance will the experiment have. So if you're willing to take more risk and go quickly, you can probably lower these things and you will conclude the experiment quicker. And all of these are things you can configure into the product, which helps you align as an organization as well on things like risk appetite. And then when it concludes, you get a shipping recommendation based off how you configured it. So based on quality checks, deterioration checks, success metrics, guardrail metrics, it will tell you whether you should ship or don't ship, essentially. And then collaboration, again, is a really important part here. So throughout an experiment, we have features like reviews and comments you can add into on top of your experiment. A big problem I already mentioned was coordination, and it's been a challenge for a long time. Today we have the home screen that we've been looking at here in this example might have upwards 20 or 30 different teams wanting to run an experiment at the same time in a pretty limited space. So for them to know who else is trying to do something in the home screen is really important, and we need a good way for them to know who they need to talk to collaborate with, to figure out how to set things up. So that's where we have this concept of surfaces, where all that is built in as well. So that's the platform and that's the journey. And just a couple of key learnings here is, the first one is that a culture of innovation does not come for free. This is a lot about intentional leadership and of course hiring the right people, but I think a lot of the behaviors we see is a consequence of the culture that you already have in place. So when you bring in people, you need to make sure to nurture their ideas and drive innovation. And an experimentation culture is sort of a way to, in a way, operationalize innovation, if you will. And that, in turn, is the blend of product development practices and the approach to product development with having a really good platform on top of which you can run your experiments. And the last thing I want to say is that data science is not called science for nothing. I think this is something we might forget sometimes. When you look at something like an experimentation process, it's, how hard can it be? You just split the users, you give one group an experiment, and you keep the other in a control group, and you just compare it. Like, that's simple, just a couple of data pipelines, and we're good to go. But every single part of this journey comes with a whole field of science, and we brought in a lot of like PhDs and people who are extremely seasoned in this space, who write academic papers and things like that, and we built all that into the platform. It is a super complex space. So I think it's important to remember that. That's our journey. That's some of our learnings and takeaways. Thanks a lot.